Hello and welcome to Gremlins, Mystery, Truth, and Real Stories. One of the reasons I love this community so much is how often you come up with video suggestions that I never even considered before. Today's video is one of those cases, as a fan named Benjamin Taylor suggested today's topic. So a huge thank you goes out to you. Not only do you have an awesome first name, but you also gave me quite a unique video opportunity. I grew up watching the old Bugs Bunny rerun cartoons featuring these strange beings, and wanted to figure out what they were all about, and maybe find some truth as well. Something that was quite interesting to find out is that even though the name Gremlin is iconic and would lead many to believe it is very old, it is actually quite the opposite. While no one can quite pinpoint when the first tales were told about them, stories I'll mention shortly do reference Benjamin Franklin, so that puts us around the 18th century. Generally, these creatures are considered in line with goblin or imp folks in legends. Their descriptions vary, but commonly they are seen as very small, have elf-like ears, yellow eyes, and are frequently depicted wearing overalls. Other reports say they range in height from 6 inches to 3 feet, can have skin color ranging from gold, gray, pink, green, or red, and other times they can be completely covered in fur. Some describe them as elf-like, while others are said to be reptilian with sharp teeth and red eyes. As is the case with many folktale type creatures, your guess as to what they really look like is as good as anyone else's. The name itself is said to originate from the Old English word grimian, or gream, which means to vex someone or upset them. These beings are said to have an extensive knowledge of machinery, and at one time weren't seen in the trickster or destructive force that we know today. Frequently they were considered helpful in that they would fix machinery or even live inside a machine, making sure everything was kept working properly. As mentioned previously, stories are told that a gremlin was actually responsible for the advancements in electricity that Benjamin Franklin is known for. And in light of all this, they really seem to take on the role of another creature found in its category, which is a brownie or house elf. With those creatures they are quite helpful, but very easily upset. If angered they are said to leave, or, more in line with this video, can cause havoc and destruction in the house. This similarity makes me wonder if the two aren't naturally linked somehow. The version of the gremlin that we have today is quite tricky, which is a kind way of putting destructive. They still enjoy messing with machinery, but more in the sense of making it unable to operate. While when mentioning the name Gremlins, the 1980s movie normally comes to most people's mind, but those beings are totally different. While visually seen as bigger than most descriptions, the one found in the episode from the Twilight Zone named Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, one of my personal favorites, is quite close to the behavior of what we're talking about here. Before getting into the airplane portion of this video, I do want to mention that machines weren't the only thing that these creatures were said to affect. Things such as dulled tools, to hammers hitting your thumb, to even your hot shower turning cold, were all said to be the hijinks of these beings. Basically, anything bad that happened to a person was blamed on gremlins being involved. As many of you are aware, these creatures were frequently mentioned by pilots who had strange malfunctions. Reports of this type of encounter has its roots in stories as far back as 1917, possibly farther, from the Royal Naval Air Service. Mentioned briefly in the British newspaper called The Spectator, it went into detail about the Royal Air Force encountering a horde of imp-like creatures determined to cause as many plane malfunctions as possible. Many encounters claimed that things would malfunction on the plane only to return to normal once it was safely on the ground. A book from 1938 called the ATA Women with Wings mentioned how Scotland was considered gremlin country as pilots frequently found their biplane wires had been cut while staying there. The whole gremlin craze didn't really take off until World War II, where pilots from both sides of the war described the same creatures with similar destructive tendencies. Apparently the activity got so bad that even the British Air Ministry officially acknowledged their existence and set out to investigate their occurrences. A pamphlet was created with supposed techniques to utilize in order not to attract the creatures. The main thought was that being arrogant or overconfident seemed to draw the gremlins in like bait. The encounters apparently became so prevalent that when the American forces started landing on British soil, many of them started to describe the same creatures. Frequently they were seen on the wings, ripping at the metal or messing with the flaps. They were given the name Yehudis for the famous violinist, as the creatures were always fiddling. Shockingly, there are quite a few in-depth encounters with these beings that may make you question if they are real or not. During World War II, a pilot by the name of L.W. was flying his Boeing B-17 when he started to hear some strange noises coming from his craft. After taking a look around, he turned to his right and saw a grotesque creature latched onto his wing. It was described as being 3 feet tall, had gray skin, was hairless, had long arms, red eyes, and a mouthful of razor-sharp teeth. When L.W. looked out his front window, he saw a second creature almost dancing on the nose of the plane. Both creatures started pounding on and ripping at the airplane, and he claimed that they were laughing maniacally. After a few quick maneuvers, he stated that he was able to shake them free of the plane, but he thinks they just found a home on another unsuspecting craft flying that day. At first he refused to tell the story, thinking he had gone insane or was seeing things, but he finally told a friend about the ordeal. To his shock, his friend stated that on a training run the day before, he and his crew experienced the same thing. In 1939, before the United States entered the war, a cargo plane was sent out to fly from California to Hawaii with a crew of 13 men. During the flight, a distress call was sent back from the plane before all communications went dead. The aircraft managed to land on the airstrip looking like it had been hit by a missile. Upon inspection, they found 12 of the crew members dead, with odd claw mark wounds on their body. I originally thought it could have been an explosion that caused the cuts, but reports state that the cause of the wounds were from an unknown origin. In the cabin, gun shells were laying everywhere as both the pilot and co-pilot had emptied their guns into something inside the plane. The whole plane was said to reek of a strong sulfuric smell. The only survivor was the co-pilot, who was in terrible condition. Sadly, the lone survivor died only a few days later, before being able to tell what had happened to the fateful flight. Were the crew attacked by a gremlin, and the pilot and co-pilot were trying to kill it with their pistol fire? We will never know. I will briefly mention that while these beings are normally remembered as being mischievous, there are reports of them being helpful. Charles Lindbergh claimed that during his flight from New York to Paris, he at one point started to feel strange, and claimed he saw several beings appear out of vapor. Unlike most stories, these beings told him that he would be kept safe during his flight, and that they would make sure of it. They even went as far as demonstrating their impressive knowledge of aviation. Charles refused to tell his story until later in his life for fear of ridicule. While Mr. Lindbergh may have had some physical stress causing him to hallucinate in this situation, I do want to point out that how he described them almost reminds me of the stories depicting the jinn. There are many more stories out there about these creatures, but it seems most of their activity stopped not long after the 1950s. So at this point, let's look at what the whole phenomenon could possibly be. As you may have figured, the idea of things malfunctioning in older planes wasn't an uncommon occurrence. Many of the issues could be blamed on normal things that were just overlooked. What most people think was the real culprit was the idea of keeping morale up. Rather than pointing a finger at a fellow crew member for something not being properly maintained, it was easier to blame it on a mystery creature. As with most things, the reason it possibly spread to American forces is due to the fact of power of suggestion. When it comes to the opposing force, multiple posters and pamphlets were made about gremlins and their behaviors. It is feasible to assume that some of this literature made it into the opposing military's hands and got them thinking about their own mysterious mechanical issues. The only thing I can say about the physical sightings is stress or being under duress from extreme environments. However, these are only suggestions, as some reports are harder to explain away. So what do you think? Are gremlins real, or are they a good excuse for faulty machinery that was improperly taken care of? As usual, if you are new to my channel, thank you for giving me the opportunity. And if you liked what you saw, please click that subscribe button. It also would greatly be appreciated if you could give this video a thumbs up as well. Before I go, I wanted to mention that as of late, some detrimental things have been occurring around YouTube as a platform, and I have a separate video already made to explain this to you if you are unaware. Of course, since creating that video, new developments have occurred, and will be edited in as well. I just wanted to mention this so you weren't caught off guard when another video pops up this week. With that, be safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Later.